in a world where we don't have any more Game of Thrones to watch on Sundays until God only knows when, because apparently they can't fake snow anymore. Only one man has provided you content for a Sunday night. And unfortunately, that man is me. It's Sunday, July 10th, 2016.
This is not a test.
This is the Wrestling News Experience. After Dark. Obviously, we did not do the show last night because when we got right down to it, the only news that anyone's going to want to talk about was happening while my show was on, so nobody was going to pay attention to my show, and since I'm an egomaniac, we had to put the show off for a day. Of course, I am Stephen Randle. This is the Wrestling News Experience After Dark. If you happen to be listening live, we have a live chat you can get a part of, and we welcome all comers. Participate in the live show. If you would like to listen, if you listen to the show not live, which is a lot of people, and you'd like to participate anyway, you can follow us on Facebook at TWNE After Dark. You can follow me on Twitter at Dave the Camel. And you can follow us also. You can find the show in a number of places, including Spreaker.com, ForeignMania.com, iTunes, Stitcher, and as part of the Wrestling to the Max podcast network. But with all that out of the way, we are here to talk about UFC 200, and I know absolutely nothing about UFC other than some of the names of the people involved. I know enough to hold up a conversation with someone who knows vaguely, slightly more than I do, which is good because I have to cover UFC for my job. But anyway, if you're wondering, the only UFC event I have ever watched in full was one, like it was a single-digit UFC before it was owned by Zuffa. Dan Severn won a tournament back when they still did a whole tournament as their event. It was crazy. Yes, old. Remember? So at UFC 200, of course, the big match after many shuffles, the true big match, of course, was Mark Hunt, who I know nothing about, versus Brock Lesnar, returning to the UFC Octagon after 4.5 years away, while still under WWE contract. He's under WWE contract for 2 years, let's not forget. He actually has a match at SummerSlam now, which we'll talk about in a second. But most importantly, Brock Lesnar dominated, as I understand it, for 3 rounds and defeated Mark Hunt and looked as good as a 38-year-old man who hadn't been in UFC for 4.5 years could possibly look, especially since he won. Now, where does this take Brock from here? Before everyone starts going, oh, Brock Lesnar won a UFC match. He's 6-3 in his UFC career, by the way. Let's not forget that. But before we start going, oh, Brock Lesnar won that fight, and that should mean that he could go back in UFC and get in the title picture. Again, he's 38. And Mark Hunt, while he may have big punching power, and I understand that, and that gives him what they call a puncher's chance, which, if you look up, isn't actually a really good chance. For all I don't know about UFC, from what I understood is that the key matchup here was that Hunt could punch well, and Brock doesn't like getting punched in the head, but Brock is a superior wrestler. And as it always turns out in these UFC fights, there's not a lot of stand-up punching, and eventually Brock got to him. That's what I understand. Again, I don't understand UFC at all. But, so we all saying this with grains of salt. But to get back to the matter at hand, as much as the one thing I know about Mark Hunt is he was, I believe, the 8th ranked heavyweight in UFC, which means he's not in line. He would never, if he'd beaten Brock Lesnar, he wasn't in line for a title shot. He would have had to beat like 3 or 4 other guys to even get a sniff of a title shot. And that means that just because Brock Lesnar won a fight against a top 10 ranked heavyweight does not mean that Brock Lesnar will be challenging for the UFC heavyweight title anytime in the future, if ever. For starters, he's still a 2-year contract with the WWE. They let him have he negotiated this one match as part of them wanting him to work extra days leading up to WrestleMania. There is not another UFC date in his contract as of right now that we know of. This was a feature fight. It got a lot more press because they lost the Conor McGregor fight to UFC 202, and they lost John Jones and Cormier due to the drug suspension 3 days ago. So the Lesnar Hunt match got more publicity. But again, this was not a number one contenders match for the heavyweight title. This was a glorified exhibition match in which, of course, Brock Lesnar was going to have decent odds to win because they were not going to put him up against a guy who was an actual contender. They're going to put up. This was the thing, similar to actually what happened to Cormier, is he lost his massive fight with Jones, which was going to pay him lots of money 3 days before the event and through no fault of his own. So they set him up with Anderson Silva, who was 41, 9 weeks off gallbladder surgery, still one of the best UFC fighters of all time, but there was no intent that there was not going to be anything more than Cormier beating up Silva because it was a fight on 3 days' notice. But at the same time, they weren't going to put Cormier in against some sort of tomato can. They had to put him up with somebody with name value so they could justify the match. And it was the same thing with Brock. They weren't going to put Brock in against some guy. They weren't going to put him up against Mickey Gall or the Mickey Gall of the heavyweight division, like CM Punk is getting. And not that Gall's not going to beat CM Punk, but that's like Mickey Gall against a real UFC fighter is not a fair fight. They had to put Brock in there against someone who would be, it would be a credible 50-50 fight, and as far as I saw from the odds, it was a 50-50 fight. But there was a chance at least that Brock could beat him, and he did. There was an equal chance that Brock could have lost that match if he'd taken a bad punch, and that chance was there too. And WWE was taking a big chance on that. But the thing was, as qualified as Hunt was, this was not some sort of step in the road for Brock to dominate UFC again. He got to get paid $2.5 million plus fight bonuses to have one fight at the biggest UFC since the last time Brock fought, and since way back at UFC 100 when Brock brought in like god-awful number of buys. By god-awful, I mean an insanely large amount of buys. But this was just going to be a feature. Yeah, if Hunt had won, maybe he'd be on the contenders track. But since Brock won, Brock will not be fighting again unless he negotiates another fight, and Hunt is definitely not in the title picture. Now, what does this mean for WWE? Well, they get an extra bonus because Brock won. If he'd lost, they never would mention it again. Because he won, they will probably crow about it on Monday. Also, of course, UFC had to promote SummerSlam and promote Brock's match with, drumroll, never mind, it's Randy Orton. I don't understand this match. Okay, I do understand this match looking at it from a purely logical business perspective. WWE wanted to have an opponent for Brock Lesnar for SummerSlam announced so that it would be promoted on the UFC 200 show, which will be seen by at least 1 million people. Which business-wise is kind of smart to make sure you have an opponent and not just Brock will appear. Granted, they were taking a risk that Brock would not, and we still don't know, would not suffer some sort of major injury, concussion, or anything else that would keep him out of the ring for SummerSlam, which is just over a month away. And that is still a possibility. If a doctor won't clear him, he cannot fight at SummerSlam. So the good thing behind that is a match with Randy Orton, who hasn't been on TV since late 2015, with a variety of injuries. You can take that fight off the card and nobody will care because Randy Orton actually is irrelevant to current storylines. The other thing was Randy Orton is a big enough name that it's conceivable he could beat Brock and we'll get a decent match and a couple good spots out of it. Probably an F5 and an RKO spot that everybody seems to be crying for. But Brock Lesnar, here's how it looked. If Brock had lost, he beats Randy Orton to regain his WWE credibility. Since Brock won, he continues to be the indestructible Brock Lesnar in WWE, and he will beat Randy Orton. There is no situation with Randy Orton beats Brock Lesnar, and it needed to be a guy at that level who can put on a good match with Brock, where the build doesn't matter because it's Brock Lesnar versus Randy Orton. There's no build. It's credible enough that people might pay money to see Brock Lesnar destroy Randy Orton, and there is no universe in which Randy Orton loses, and losses don't hurt Randy Orton because he's Randy Orton. He's already established, and it doesn't matter. In terms of creativity, it is absolute rock bottom creativity-wise because there's no issue between them. They haven't fought since 2002 when they were both rookies. Neither of them are involved in ongoing storylines. Randy Orton hasn't been on TV since late 2015. He's injured, and there is word that he may not actually be ready for SummerSlam, although I don't think they'd set themselves up for that. And also, it's Randy Orton, and he hasn't been relevant in a long time. At best, you could say he was relevant for WrestleMania 30, which was still 2 years ago at this point. So I can say that I will not be buying SummerSlam because, well, I have the network, but I will not be watching WWE SummerSlam to watch Brock Lesnar versus Randy Orton, and that's kind of the thing, is they've done, much like the brand extension, they've done this thing where they've announced something that's going to happen, and then they're going to make it happen on TV, as opposed to making something happen on TV and then announcing it as you do, in terms of like actual storytelling. From the chat, we have will Orton and his shoulders handle any more than 5 suplexes? Who knows? Orton does have a chronic shoulder condition. It can cause problems at the worst possible moment. I will tell you that I would like to believe they won't put him back in the ring with someone like Brock Lesnar, who's going to throw a dozen suplexes, if they didn't believe he could handle it. I will say that Brock Lesnar's suplexes, as dangerous as they look, are technically a safe version of the German suplex, in which you take it on your back and not your shoulders and neck. Someone had this pointed out to me because I was thinking the same thing. Is that back in the days, Chris Benoit and Kurt Angle doing all the German suplexes and wrecked the crap out of their neck, because they were doing high angle Germans where you landed on your neck and shoulders. Brock's, if you watch them, and he does a lot of them, he does ones where he lifts you by the waist, and that's why Brock's suplexes are also release Germans. He will release you, and you land flat back. It's not the safest bump in the world, but as wrestling bumps go, it's actually pretty secure, which is why he gets to throw a dozen of them in a match. From the chat, lucky person going to SummerSlam, not exactly excited for it. Now, before we get, the match might not be great, but to not be exactly excited for it, that's too bad. We're not going to judge that pay-per-view before the next pay-per-view, and a brand split have happened yet. I'm not going to say right now that, Brock Lesnar versus Randy Orton, well, SummerSlam is ruined. It's definitely one of those things like, well, this is a wasted opportunity, and they're going to have to make up for it later on the card. And I suspect we'll be getting an AJ Styles versus John Cena match of some sort, which will probably make up for that, and whatever else the Shield will be doing. But yeah, this is a wasted opportunity for them, I think. The problem is, of course, is that Brock's not going to probably be on TV for much of the build, and Randy Orton may or may not be on TV for much of the build. They may just have the match. Again, kind of a waste of time, don't you think? Yes, just that match, not the show. So yeah, we can't judge SummerSlam yet. There is way too much happening before that show goes down before we can judge it, other than as a wasted opportunity in a single match that's going to happen. Think of it, I think it helps with Brock at this point, is people are still hoping for that thing where he's going to put somebody over, and you have to know that if he's going to put anybody over, it's going to be Roman Reigns. I think people are too invested in this idea that WWE cares about making that streak breaking mean anything, making Brock's wins mean anything in terms of putting somebody else over. They're not. For them, they have Brock Lesnar. They're not going to use him to put somebody else over. They have Brock Lesnar. Brock Lesnar, the super athlete who comes in and destroys people and may or may not actually sell any merchandise or product or get any more viewers. But he's the star. They're not using him to make another star. He is the star. But yes, the thing is, if there's really nobody who was going to beat Brock except for Roman Reigns, and is anybody really in a rush to see that match? Sorry, that's bad news, but it's all I got. I'm shrugging and you can't see because it's a radio show. Yeah. From our chat, the way I look at it is I'm going to take over Brooklyn, SummerSlam, and Raw, and TakeOver will make the whole weekend worth it. I mean, if you think that we're getting Nakamura versus Joe at TakeOver, do you really need anything else to happen that weekend? And I'm pretty sure that's what we're getting. and also probably Bailey Asuka too. Really, at that point, for people like us who are going to watch the Takeover and the SummerSlam and the Raw, that's our weekend. Everything else is just gravy. Um, so we're going to leave UFC for a second. I hate to do this. I'm just going to take a quick commercial break. I will be right back. Listen to some wonderful music while I'm gone. All right, I am sorry about that. Someone at the door had to handle it. Don't live in a soundproof studio. So we're going to move away from UFC. We're going to move back into WWE proper. What else did anything else other happen than UFC? I feel like there was something. While I search, we can talk about the fact that Vince McMahon will be on Raw this week, which isn't going to get anybody else to watch, but at least it will likely involve deciding who the hell is running Raw and who's running SmackDown, and it will almost certainly be some combination of Shane will run show. Well, my voice went somewhere. Shane will run one show and Stephanie will run the other one, unless they want to assign. And they're COOs now, so if you think they're going to give someone that power that isn't Shane and Stephanie, I don't know what to tell you. But yeah, Vince will be on Raw this week. What else? There was something else big. Oh, the New Day is going to that compound, and there'll be a battle royal to determine the new challenger for the Intercontinental title. Presumably, Zack Ryder is now challenging Rusev and has new music that I haven't heard. I wish they'd decide what they're doing with Zack Ryder. He got a win over Sheamus on SmackDown. It looks like he might actually be getting not a serious push. He'll probably lose to Rusev, but a television time as a singles. And I wish they'd decide if he's going to be on the main roster or if he's going to team with the Hype Bros or what. Because it's not that I don't like Mojo Rawley, it's just that he's much more tolerable in a tag team where his deficiencies are hidden up by a better wrestler. And I feel good. If Zack Ryder's getting a singles push on WWE, they should do that, but they should stop jerking him around with the Hype Bros as well, because you have to think that he's running the normal WWE main roster tour, which means Raw and SmackDown on the house shows, and he's also doing NXT tapings with the Hype Bros. He's working a lot harder than some people. So it'd be nice to see him getting something out of it, even if it is 5 years too late. But anyway, I thought about what the other thing I was want to talk about, and it's where all the rumors going around about who's ending up on which brands, and we seem to the latest one, of course, none of this is ever confirmed or true until they announce it on the draft floor. But the idea that AJ Styles and John Cena will carry one brand, probably Raw, and Roman Reigns and Seth Rollins will carry the other brand, probably SmackDown. And what that makes me think about is none of those four people are currently the WWE brackets, because they're not calling it that anymore, World Heavyweight Bracket Champion. If there was ever an indication that they're splitting the belts back up, the fact that they're calling it the WWE Championship would be one of them. I feel bad for Dean Ambrose. I feel really bad. If the plan is not to continue to have Dean Ambrose as champion after Battleground, and if the plan is always going to be that the title is going to go back to Roman Reigns or even Seth Rollins, I feel bad for Dean Ambrose, because he's done nothing but work hard, get the fans on his side. He's getting the ovations on the Raws Um, uh, he deserves to carry the brand for a while. He deserves more than a 1 month title period. He deserves more than to be the third fiddle behind everyone else on Raw or SmackDown when he's supposed to be the world champion. All he's done is wrestle good matches, entertain people, and get the fans on his side. And we're stuck in this thing, and it's becoming more and more apparent. And it shows through, especially with someone like Brock Lesnar on the roster, is that WWE has decided who's going to be the star. And it's not a new thing, but it's something that has bothered me for quite a while now, and it's probably since the Attitude Era. It's the idea that we've decided that this title reign will last this long because we have booking plans around it. Not we're going to give you the title, and if you get over, you get to keep the title for a while and get to keep going until we decide that there might be someone better or a better storyline where you lose the title. At first recall, not first recall, but one of the big ones I remember, and I'm going to invoke the name. When Chris Benoit won the World Heavyweight title at WrestleMania 20, every report is that they already knew that was going to be a short-term thing. He was going to probably lose the belt to Randy Orton at SummerSlam, and maybe Randy Orton's name wasn't the specific one, but by the time Benoit won that title, they were already planning for when he was going to lose it. It wouldn't have mattered if buy rates had spiked. It wouldn't have mattered if ratings had gone up. His title reign had a shelf life because that was what WWE said was going to happen. And it feels that way with Dean Ambrose. As they gave him the title at Money in the Bank, mostly I still believe because they didn't want to deal with having a Money in the Bank briefcase while they were dealing with a brand split. They could have, but they thought it'd be simpler not to, and I can't disagree with that. And the problem is they've given the title to a guy with the idea that, oh yeah, he's going to lose it, possibly as early as Battleground. And I sit there and I go, so it doesn't matter what work he does, whether he connects the fans. The ratings aren't going up. Let's not pretend that. But it's hard to say that when there was a holiday this week. But no matter what he does, no matter all the work he did, it's not going to matter because his title reign has a shelf life, and it's what they've decided it's going to be, and that nothing will change that. And that kind of bugs me. Because again, it goes against the whole idea of we can create new stars. You can't create new stars because you've already decided how long their title reigns are going to be, and what their chance is going to be. There is no open-ended chance. You get this chance of this long, and then it's over. And if you're not good enough at the end of it, then that was your chance. And it bothers me. It does. And maybe I'm going too far, but for Dean Ambrose is somebody who has been the guy who got looked over and overlooked in the Shield buildup. Sure, he got title matches with Seth Rollins, but we knew he wasn't going to ever win them. He gets to be the guy who loses to exploding televisions and who does the job to Brock Lesnar because it's Brock Lesnar. And he's the guy who the fans are really behind because he plays both an underdog character and one of those cool characters that you like to get behind because he's kind of cool. But it doesn't matter because they've decided that Roman Reigns is the guy and he's going to be afforded every opportunity. And it doesn't matter what Dean Ambrose does. It doesn't matter that the crowd loves him. It doesn't matter that he's getting the first fully positive reactions from a crowd for a WWE champion since I can't remember when, and maybe since Daniel Bryan. And probably since Daniel Bryan. And it won't matter because Roman Reigns is going to be the guy and Dean Ambrose is just there to hold the title while Roman Reigns has been suspended 30 days for a wellness policy violation. For which his punishment, again, is a main event match at the next pay-per-view. I mean, what are you supposed to do with, how are you supposed to get behind anybody on that roster if you sit there knowing, I know we're a bit more inside baseball than other people, but it's hard because a lot of us are we're the people who are the 2 million or 3 million core viewers who are watching every week, and we know enough to know who's going to be the guy and who's not going to be the guy. And we have to sit there and we cheer. We've basically resigned ourselves to the fact that what we say and what we react to doesn't matter because they've decided what the reactions are going to be through audio sweetening and video packages that cut out the crowd noise and doing whatever it takes to make it seem like the crowd reactions aren't what the crowd reactions are. and we've reached a point where they have never been more blatant about what they're doing than now. And it's starting to piss me off. Because to sit there and have guys who get the right, like, I mean, we're sitting in a feud with Roman Reigns, who the crowd doesn't want to cheer for but is the face, Seth Rollins, who the crowd wants to cheer for but is a heel, and Dean Ambrose, who the crowd wants to cheer for and is a face but is not the central part of the storyline, even though he's the WWE champion. And you sit there and go, who is booking this and why aren't they paying attention to what's actually happening on their program? Does Vince McMahon just sit in a room with his eyes closed and earplugs in every Monday for 3 hours and then assume everything went to plan? I don't know. Like, this is a guy who, although he's never been fully in touch with the pulse of the younger audience because he's old, but managed to at least have people who would give him the gist of what the crowds were into and go along with it. Granted, he had to be pushed to the edge to get the Attitude Era in the first place, but Stone Cold Steve Austin would still have broken through probably regardless because he was one of those once-in-a-generation talents. It baffles me how the show is being run this way. They don't change. They write their plan, and that's the plan, and that's what the plan is going to be, and we don't change plans. If you get a heel or a face turn, it's not because the crowd responds in an organic fashion and we decide that you're better this way. It's because, well, we've decided we want to push you this way. And you shouldn't entirely go by crowd reactions. That's obvious, but there are certain truths. And I don't know. I'm rambling and I should stop. From the chat, just for an idea for what's going on with the title situation, is that Reigns will probably win the WWE title at Battleground, which he shouldn't. If anybody wins that title from Dean Ambrose, it should be Seth Rollins, because Reigns should not get to come back from a suspension and win the title. If he does that, I don't know how you justify that. But and the opposite brand will get some sort of tournament with Cena and AJ meeting in the finals at SummerSlam. And if they do that, you know what? It's a Cena and AJ Styles match for a world title at SummerSlam, and I'm fine with it. I mean, John Cena will probably win, but maybe not. Given the news that he's probably cutting back on his house show appearances, because he's suffered a lot of injuries lately, and maybe it's catching up with him, and he's not as young as he used to be either. There's a chance that maybe they'll have AJ Styles win and decide maybe we need to not so much go as a different direction, but does John Cena need to be the 16-time champion? I guess it's SummerSlam, so it's a big enough venue for it to happen. But I feel you can milk a bunch of title matches out of the possibility that John Cena could become a 16-time champion, as opposed to John Cena becomes a 16-time champion, because that's just one of those things. In a ways, it would be bigger than him breaking the record, because 16 times ties the record with Flair, which at one point, I mean, it's been a while, but nobody thought that would ever happen. Yeah, Cena will be a 16-time champion one day. I'm just questioning if now is the time. I'm wondering if you could tease it a few more times before you actually pull the trigger on it. But anyway, I just, yeah. So that's that's mostly my issue right now, is that we're a couple weeks away, I guess, from staring down possibly another Roman Reigns title reign, but in either way, possibly the end of Dean Ambrose's title reign, and he hasn't gotten, and even though he's done everything right, it's still going to end. And he probably won't get rematches. He's not going to get to the SummerSlam rematch. He's going to get shunted down into another feud almost certainly. And it bugs me. Now, I don't know. I could be wrong. But we'll see. I'm also not entirely thrilled that Kevin Owens versus Sami Zayn are going to end their feud at Battleground in a straight-up wrestling match that they ended up on the same team at July 4th, but it was a July 4th match and didn't really matter. But it seems like that's a match that if you're going to pretend that it's the end of a blood feud, maybe it should have some sort of gimmick. We are not. This is the last Raw. Okay, so there's two Raws, two SmackDowns. The second one will be the draft, and then Battleground. Um, at this point, I mean, we know kind of what the matches will be for Battleground, so but we can't really speculate on that because nothing's been set up. I don't know. It's hard to say with this week because with the July 4th Raw, where a lot of stuff that didn't matter actually happened, um, you can tell when they main event the show with that weird idea of the USA versus the world, only the USA is a bunch of jobbers who suddenly become all Hall of Fame athletes in a single night. Um, like I said, if this leads to something for Zack Ryder, I'm all for it, but I'm sitting there going, watching, let's see, we have the world team, which is Kevin Owens, Sami Zayn, Cesaro, Chris Jericho, the Lucha Dragons, and Alberto Del Rio, and Sheamus, which is like world champions aplenty, some of the best wrestlers in the company against guys who haven't been on television in months. And then they won, and you sit there, you go, oh my God, and the USA team's going to win because it's July 4th. I mean, we already got away with one when Titus O'Neil didn't win the U.S. title just while dressed like Apollo Creed. They're not going to have the USA lose twice in the same night. And it just, maybe it's just from an outside perspective, from a Canadian looking at the American patriotism thing. And listen, you want to love your country, and that's great. But stuff like that, where it's to the point of unbelievable, just bending over backwards to make America great. It just, it felt unnatural compared to the, like, it's one of those things where it's like, it doesn't have, you don't have to win every time. And I guess, like I said, Rusev won. But if you remember, Apollo Creed died, so at least Titus got away from that. Question from the chat, so let's go there. Let's get off this stupid topic because I know nothing about what I'm talking about. Do we get Baylor in the Intercontinental title battle royal? I'd like to believe that Baylor is coming up for something more than the Intercontinental title, but I can't feel like they're going to debut. Like, if anyone's going to debut, I think it's the draft or later. I'm not sure who's in the battle royal. I haven't checked, but I'd say it's probably Cesaro. He'd be my first choice because he never really finished the feud with The Miz. If they want to go a different direction, I don't know what there's anybody left really. You're kind of looking at the people who were in the USA the World match who aren't currently involved in feuds. And I think it's got to be. Cesaro with Apollo Crews as a dark horse is probably the right choice to go. It's going to be a face. Zack Ryder, like I said, probably going to be against Rusev. Shield's already involved with themselves. Kevin Owens is fighting Sami Zayn. The tag teams are fighting with each other. I mean, you could... Enzo and Cass and John Cena and AJ Styles in the club already have a match for Battleground. Cesaro is pretty much the biggest one left who doesn't already have a match. So if you're going to put money on it, although I probably wouldn't, you have to go with Cesaro at this point. Short of, yeah, like a Baylor surprise entrance, which I don't see happening. Baylor will appear at the draft, Battleground, or the Raw or SmackDown after Battleground at the earliest. Obviously, he's been written off television following this week. I guess that's kind of a spoiler. He's facing Nakamura this week on NXT, but we all know how that's going to end. Similar to how American Alpha were basically written off last week, losing 2 out of 3 falls, which is an excellent match that you should probably watch. And actually, the entire show is pretty good because not only do you get American Alpha this week versus on NXT versus the Revival, 2 out of 3 falls, great tag team wrestling, like one of those matches that makes you start thinking about maybe a tag team renaissance this time, maybe, but probably not. It also has Bayley versus Alexa Bliss, which is basically an Alexa Bliss coming out party where she shows that she learned a lot of things since the Horsewomen left, and she is probably, aside from Bayley and Asuka, the most talented female wrestler left on that roster. What was the other stuff that happened on that show? Those are the two important parts, and Rhino, but and then you can just slip right in past that. There's the Cruiserweight Classic bracketology special they did last week, which showed me a lot of guys I didn't know much about. And the Cruiserweight Classic starts this week for sure. Yeah, Alexa Bliss. This is just going off from the chat. She's great facial expressions, great character, but it's been hard to judge how much she's improved on the ring until the match this week against Bayley. She's really good. Like she's worked her character into her moveset. She knows what she's doing. She does it well. Um, I could see her like carrying her share of the NXT Women's Division when Bayley hopefully leaves by SummerSlam. Like, come on, guys. I don't see what you're waiting for on that, other than for Sasha Banks to finish with Charlotte. Uh, I could see her at the very least being Asuka's next big feud, um, but she should. She's someone you should be paying attention to. Just because there's all these people leaving, what it's doing, what developmental show is, it's opening up spaces for us to see people in new lights, without because like the women's division in NXT is never going to evolve. It wasn't going to evolve when there were the four horsewomen on top, and now it needs Bayley to get out of the way so that the new generation can show what they've got. Because they've got a full roster of women who don't get to be on TV because Bayley's still there. And I'm not blaming her. She's just doing what she's told, and it'd be a shame not to have her on TV at all. But they haven't put her up in the main roster when she's clearly so far above NXT that it's ridiculous. And they need to clear her out so that they can get this next generation of women showing off what they've learned. Because clearly they are learning stuff. Like Nia Jax has improved a lot even since her match with Bayley at TakeOver UK. She's improved a lot. Carmella's improved. Alexa Bliss. And plus they have women on that roster you haven't even seen yet. What's her name now? Amber Moon is, I think, what her gimmick is now. She was known as Athena, I think, on the indie roster or on the indie circuit. You got Peyton Royce and Billie Kay who are accomplished Australian wrestlers, and none of them are getting any TV time right now. But they are women who know how to wrestle, and they're being trained by one of the best women wrestlers in the world, in Sarah Amato. So I have no worries about the women's division. Athena, yes, I was right. They've been trained. They need to get that showcase so we can start rebuilding the women's division in NXT. It's the same thing. Like, there's a reason why there's 6 dozen tag teams running around WWE right now, is because they're doing a brand split, and they're probably going to split the tag titles or have them transition, and you need a tag division on both shows. So now we have 8 to 10 tag teams, but you're going to need to replace them eventually, which is why you've got a bunch of tag teams. Plus, they got Dusty Rhodes Classic coming up after TakeOver, no doubt. You need a bunch of tag teams for that. And it's got to work like that. So you got to move the rest of the women out, so you can move the rest of the women in, so we can see what they can do. Talking too long about this subject because it's really not that important. Rambling. Sorry, I had to turn the air conditioning off so it wouldn't make noise on the show, and now the heat is getting to my brain. What else we got? Is there anything else important? Is there anything else big happening? It was a holiday week. I would have felt bad not doing a show because we had the Brock stuff, but there isn't a lot going on right now. Hopefully that will change. I mean, obviously we got Vince making some announcement on Raw. We got the draft coming up in 2 weeks. We got Battleground. At some point, Roman Reigns will return to the cheers of nobody. From the chat, Athena, if you don't know, I've seen this, but she'll be over with a lower keeper indie finisher, which is a leap off the top rope into a stunner, which I've seen, and she does it really well. It depends on if they'll let somebody do a stunner and if they'll let her call out her name from the indies, which was the O-Face, which I doubt will be something that actually happens. That seems unlikely. The other thing, of course, is Lucha Underground is in the middle of Ultimate Lucha Dos. The first episode was this week. Started with the Mac and Cage in a repeat of their match from Ultimate Lucha Uno, which was really good, and this one was no exception. Good first show of 3. Highly recommend. If you have a way to watch Lucha Underground, you should watch it because that was good. Also, of course, how could I forget to talk about the Final Deletion, which I did watch. And I watched it with commentary from Brian and Vinny from Figure 4, because that made it a little more palatable. I have to say this, okay? I don't want to denigrate it because it's clearly one of those wacky things that is just so wrestling that I'm glad it exists. It wasn't a wrestling match. It was a spectacle, and it's one of those things done by a company with nothing to lose. I was entertained, perversely almost, because but in a way, it's not going to move the needle. It was interesting. It was interesting from a creative perspective, and I appreciated it from that perspective. You have to appreciate that Matt Hardy has reinvented his character again into something weird and wacky, and he got his wife and his father-in-law, who was Senor Benjamin, and he got all that. He got all that to, and it worked out in a way. Like, it's one of those things. Yeah, it wasn't good. Let's not pretend it was B movie, but it was entertaining as hell, and it's something that belongs in wrestling. It's not going to save a company, and it shouldn't probably be the main event of an organization, but it was entertaining as hell. And as much as I think that Jeff Hardy has too many personal problems to be back in WWE, and as much as I think Matt Hardy has burned his bridges in WWE so many times he'll never be welcome back, it was good to watch them do something they clearly believed in doing. And they had to know that what it was going to be just wacky and crazy and out there and not particularly good. But it was different, and damn it, different is good. It's not just a Taco Bell slogan from a couple years ago. I wouldn't watch it multiple times because I'm sure it gets less charming the more you watch it. And the part where they pretended to have a wrestling match wasn't really very good. But like everything about it, and good on Matt Hardy for coming up with a character to reinvent himself. To be given the freedom to do that, and then whether it works or not, it already kind of has, because he's a different guy. And Matt Hardy was always the guy who you thought he'd just be left. When Jeff Hardy went on to his eventual career as a teen heartthrob single star, Matt Hardy was going to have nothing. But he has reinvented himself so many times, and some of them have worked and some of them haven't, and there was a period where he went insane. But to have the ability to reinvent yourself, he's truly a smart guy. I mean, he might be crazy. In fact, he's probably crazy. But he's also a smart guy when it comes to wrestling, and he knows things about how to reinvent a character. And it just worked. It did. I wouldn't want to see Final Deletion 2. Like I said, I don't want to see WWE's take on Final Deletion, which worries me about this Wyatt compound thing. Because they wouldn't get the joke about it actually being bad, but being so bad that it's good. But I think that it fit a niche in wrestling that I think has been underserved. The closest that it can come to, and I'm not trying to denigrate Lucha Underground in any way, but it's the same thing. It's accepting that this is a wrestling show and there's something inherently crazy about wrestling, and just embrace it. You know what? You can have broken Matt Hardy and holographic drones and shooting fireworks at each other and guys who are little time travelers from Mexico and somebody who is the reincarnation of death and somebody's brother who lives in a cage in the basement of the restaurant. And you can have all of these things and they can be part of wrestling, because wrestling is crazy. It really is. And one of the things that WWE does occasionally is take it too goddamn seriously. I don't want to see the wackiness all the time, but a certain level of it is exactly what belongs in wrestling. And so I enjoyed what I saw. It's not going to get me to watch Impact anymore, mostly because I don't have Pop TV, but also because I don't have that kind of time. And it's not like the rest of the show is going to be Final Deletion, nor would I want it to be. But it was a bright spot in a company that has been damn short on them for quite a while. And good on them for doing something somewhat right. Now don't fuck it up. Other than that, so it wasn't the worst week in wrestling after all. We've proved that a wrestler can beat a UFC fighter, I guess. And yeah, the 4th of July episode wasn't great, but not bad. And we had the Final Deletion and Lucha Underground. It's a good week in wrestling. And what more can you ask for? I know what I could ask for. I could ask for Pokemon Go to be available in Canada so I could play it, because you all look like you're having so much goddamn fun, and I want to play it. I want to be part of the culture, because that's the thing. I don't want to get off on a rant here. We're going into video games a little sideways here. But what I've seen from the Pokemon Go is the sense of community it's making. Is the idea that not just people are being forced to get out and exercise and go walking places to catch Pokemon, but that lots of people are doing it together. It is actually becoming a social game. And while you can't interact with each other in the game, it's created this social thing where people are finding places together where there are Pokemon. And it's not the best. It's from everything I've seen, it's not the best game in the world. In fact, it's not even close. But it's going to be played by millions of people around the world eventually, and it looks like a lot of people are embracing the social aspect of it. And I have to say that that is a great thing, especially after the week we've had. And I don't feel qualified to address the situation, the things that are going on. Clearly, they shouldn't happen. We should be more advanced as a civilization for that. And I don't want to stand over here and be holier than thou because they don't happen in my country, because they have. And I'm lucky. I know I'm lucky, but at the same time, I never realize how lucky I am to be who I am, to live where I do, to be able to walk out in the streets and catch Pokemon without worrying about people are gonna call the cops on me, and who knows what could happen to me. Um, I don't think I properly appreciate that, and I probably don't. Uh, but we're not going to get better by being worse to each other. And I don't have anything profound to say. Uh, I don't have anything that I can't even imagine how to start to be helpful. Uh, I'm upset when I read the news. I've been upset all week. I'm glad I have escapes like professional wrestling and things like that, where I can go and I can say, and I can forget about the things that are happening. But it's not enough to forget the things that are happening for a while, but it helps. Because I can't imagine how some people are feeling this week, and I can't even pretend to that I have anything that I can contribute to the discussion. Uh, but if you're out there and you have you're you know you're worried, you're scared, and I don't know how much I can help, but I'd like to. Uh, Even if and I don't know how I can help. Maybe people can let me know. Um, Maybe it's just so simple as just trying to be a better person, which is hard because I'm pretty terrible. Uh, but I had to address it. I don't know that I've said anything good or useful, but I felt like on a week where so much bad has happened, it's been nice to have you know to look back and say some good things happened this week. Um, and I hope I've done my best. I've done my best. I hope I've entertained you for a little bit, even if it was just for 45 minutes or so, or the show is 45 minutes long, so if maybe for 20 minutes you were entertained, I hope you were. I hope it helped you feel a little better. um, Other than that, I don't know. Gonna go to work tomorrow and try to make the world slightly better through my day job of writing wrestling stuff on the internet. Not to move into a plug too directly, but I do. Of course, if you want to follow any of my other work, I write full time for the entertainment website Goliath.com. Um, I do wrestling stuff, but I also do some other things as well. Uh, but we've a good small team of people. We work really hard. We bring some stuff about wrestling, movies, games, all sorts of stuff. So if you want to support me in my day-to-day life, that's how you can do it. Of course, this podcast airs generally every week. Um, so sorry, I drifted off there. But you can follow this podcast on Facebook at TWNE After Dark. You can follow me on Twitter at Dave the Camel. You can listen to this podcast. If you don't listen to us live, which is fine because who's got the time for that? You can find it on iTunes, Stitcher, Spreaker.com, and it also gets posted on forumania.com whenever I get to it and somebody approves my posts. Anything else? And of course, yes, I can't forget, we're part of the Wrestling to the Max podcast network, which has other wrestling podcasts, gaming podcasts, sports podcasts, all sorts of things. So you can kill those time on those long drives, because that's what I do. So I want to thank everyone for listening. Day late, but I think it was worth it. I wouldn't have had the Lesnar news until well after my podcast finished if I'd done it last night. I'm going to go back to trying to beat Persona 4 before Persona 5 comes out, and getting ready for World of Warcraft Legion, because I am ridiculous. On another note, it's almost 9 o'clock, so if you happen to be looking for something that isn't Game of Thrones, I've been watching Preacher on AMC. It's pretty good. You should probably, last week was the best episode so far, so we're hoping for good things this week. On that note, I want to ask everyone to stay safe, stay positive. Things can always get better. Sounds so trite. But so thanks everyone who listened in the chat. Thanks for everyone who listened any other way. We'll see you next week. Have a good one. Always be a fan.